Welcome back, everyone. Hope you're having a great day wherever you're watching from. Bonjour to my French viewers. Here's a French Air Force plane for you. Dewatin D520. This is Battle of France, 1940. I think these first went into production 1938. So it's a Hasegawa combo. Comes with a BF-109. Reasonable value. Typical 1/72 instructions. Right into cutting sprues. This was an interesting bit that did have me scratching my head on, I think it's the gun sight. I can't say I know a huge amount about French planes in general. The instructions really weren't clear on that at all. Whoops, almost did it there. Some of you can let me know what happened in the comments. So beware of getting a bit trigger happy with your pliers. 3-piece wing. Again, nothing, non-standard. Just using regular cement. Goes together nicely. Typical Japanese moulding, I'd say. If you've done Tamiya, Hasegawa is no surprise. I don't even know the relationship between them. I guess they're competitors, but they do seem very similar in a lot of ways. I think Hasegawa probably doesn't have as much recognition as Tamiya. I haven't done a huge amount on the cockpit. Usual stuff. Give it a spray on the inside. I added a bit of styrene just to almost give some cabling pipe work. If I do have extra pieces that need a colour, I'll try and do as much as I can while I've got the paint in the airbrush. Instrument panel is just decal. I did pick up these tweezers the other day, becoming a bit of a Mr. Hobby fanboy. They're nice tweezers. They weren't cheap, but they are very good quality. Using my knife to poke things around. Here I'm using some thin cement just to take advantage of that capillary action. Bit of cleanup. There's never a lot of cleanup on these Japanese kits. That's the rubber bushings for the propeller. Keep them because you'll have spares and I can guarantee you'll lose some. Just cleaning up here, just the usual stuff. Rubbing my knife along the seam lines. As usual, be careful. Don't necessarily copy what I do. I'm using my knife, and this is quite a blunt knife by this point. I do try and keep track of where the blades are at. I'm using it to just reinforce that panel line, or I guess the cowling where it probably opens up there. I don't get too hung up on rivets at 1/72. I do focus on obvious seam lines because they're going to really ruin your final paint job. They'll come straight through. I'm using a mix of grits. I think you can see here, what have I got, 1,000, 600, 400, something like that. I'll tend to just cut some slices that I'm using for working. Quick tip, if you're cutting these, cut from the back on the non-grit side. Using Mr. Color paints. I did do a bit of an experiment here, which I wasn't happy with. Normally I use MIG Ammo rubber tires. For the tires, of course. It just gives a more rubbery effect. But yeah, the lacquer, don't know, it just reminded me of when I was 12 years old doing my kits. Here's how I do the canopies. There's no dark arts or magic or anything in doing this. There is probably one little trick that I'm not even sure it's a trick. The thing you've got to do to get nice finish on your canopy is use a really sharp blade. And I'm wary of showing too much of what I do here just because it's public and I don't want anything coming back at me if people are crazy out there. But yeah, essentially use something really sharp. I'm not even using my craft knife to do the cutting here. If it's not sharp, what will happen is when you cut, it'll drag your masking and you won't get a really sharp, clean edge. I'm just putting these odds and ends I keep on my fingers down to give some extra bonding for the masking fluid. I've diluted this Neo so that it runs into the edges, because these curves can be quite hard to do. But if you're careful, the capillary action will just draw it straight in, and you can poke and prod it a bit with a toothpick. You can get a really nice finish. If you mess it up, just let it dry and it'll rub straight off. So it's a no-risk way of doing things, but you can see how that flows in to the corners. Here I'm just using a bit of paint straight from the bottle just to fill in some of the finer gaps. And that's my magic cleaning bottle. Some of you will recognise that. So we're on to the painting. 80% of this build was messing around with painting and colours. I've come in with a grey. You'll see later that I've come back with a darker grey over this. I didn't like it. It just wasn't what I was happy with. On actual paint codes and things like that, occasionally I'll give them, but I'm trying to encourage people not to get too hung up on that. If there's specific reasons like RLMs, FS and BS, British Standards, that is, colours, then sure. But if you don't really have something strictly to hold to, I think you are best experimenting a bit. And the ultimate decider has to be the reference photo or what references you're using. So I've come in here with green. I couldn't even tell you what green I was using. I was just looking at a reference photo. It looked about right. That'll do. I know that's going to horrify some people, but you can go down very deep rabbit holes if you start chasing paints and standards. This one does this and this shade's not quite right and so on. This is just a brown. I think it was a red-brown with earth, maybe 50-50. You've got to find what works for you. There's no other way, I'd say, to do it. There's no magic formula there. I could have used masking on this, but partly I was lazy, just being honest, and it's always good to practice freehand airbrushing anyway. And I do like the finer edges, or the softer edges, I should say, that you get from freehand airbrushing. Right onto decals, there's that pretty tail. It's quite distinguishable, that sky blue, I suppose it is. And even though I don't know much about 520s, I always think of that tail with them. Decals, the usual stuff, no surprises here. Basically, get them in position with water, smooth them out, and I'll come back with one of the decal solutions. There wasn't even a lot of decals in this kit. I don't know if that's how the real world plane is. Maybe, maybe not. Using tweezers, poking things around, getting them in position, smoothing out. If you've done lots of planes, there's going to be no big surprises there. And there's the finished result. It come up nicely, or it come up very nice, I should say. So there you have it. Nice little Debertin D520 in 1/72. Hasegawa, nice kit, reasonable priced. And it come together nicely, so I'm quite happy with that. As always, let me know what you think. Happy to hear from you. Have a great day. Thanks again.